Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hey, y'all, this is episode 14, and we have arrived at the practice of using our attention. When I approached how I wanted to structure practices, what was important to me was to identify things that felt common across all sorts of different spiritual and religious traditions, and that was universal. And this practice of directing our attention is absolutely one of them. Our attention is, in my opinion, the only real part of our consciousness over which we have control. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we are able to direct where we are focused. And in so doing, we begin to change what we think about and what we are thinking about in the background. That we often don't have a whole lot of choice about our first emotional response to something or our first thought about a situation or a person or ourselves. But what we do have control and power over is where we direct our attention. So you might use the word focus. Sometimes we can use the word awareness when we talk about attention. But regardless, this is one of the most valuable currencies there is. And I mean currency. Our attention is a currency. And the reason that I know that for sure is that every business journal talks about the attention economy, which is about who can get the most eyeballs and ear holes on whatever they're trying to say or share. And beginning to optimize algorithms and use AI and LLMs as a way to shortcut or hijack people's attention means that now learning to use our attention, direct our attention skillfully, is probably more important than it's almost ever been. I think about the yogis who were meditating in caves 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 4,000, 6,000 years ago. They were, going away from the world. All of the monks who go off into the monastery to focus their attention on God or their practice or their prayers. All of the traditions, that say go on retreat, go into the forest. All of those are about restricting our environment. And by changing our environment, we change what we can focus on and what is available to our attention. In the current day and age, we are bombarded, truly. And we're bombarded so much that we actually have developed a lot of unconscious and subconscious skill about filtering and editing out the vast amount of information that we are receiving on a daily, hourly, moment by moment basis. Your attention is being fought over by companies worth billions of dollars, which says to me that it is valuable. And certainly it's valuable because if they can get your attention, then they can sell you something. And, then your attention currency converts into dollar currency or yen or euro or rupee currency. But when we think about something as a currency, right, it's usually just something that we trade. It's something that we have agreed has a symbolic value, right? Like a paper dollar money doesn't actually have inherent value. But your attention does. And I believe that because you can't strip the value out of your attention. There is no market for trading attention as it relates to another in the same way that there are other currency markets. And because your attention has inherent value, I think that's why this is such a profound spiritual practice. That the place that you direct your attention and your focus says something about the things that are important to you. It says something about where you are directing your energy and your other resources. And it carries with it this enormous momentum of our energy, right? There's that old saying that, like, where your attention goes, energy flows, right? I like to think of this a little bit differently, and we'll talk in a moment about what you focus on grows. Our brains are this magical pattern-making machine, and they're constantly seeking out these little, computers in our mind with all of those nerve endings. They're constantly seeking out other things that are like this thing. And so if we are not intentional with what we're focused on, right? If I go into a fear sense of I don't have enough money, I don't have enough clients, I don't have enough friends, then I will begin to pick up all of the pieces of evidence that reinforces that. My brain is seeking a pattern. And the flip side of that is if I choose to focus on how many resources are available to me, how many opportunities I have had in my life, how much privilege I have inherited, both from the generations before me, but also just winning the lottery, frankly, of being born into a white body in the late 20th century, kind of a miracle. If my attention is there, I will start to notice all of the other things that are similar to that. And there is then this natural sense of gratitude and appreciation that builds. And then I am able to harness, right, more opportunity. I'm able to use those opportunities to my best advantage. It's just an example. I want to give you another example because to me, this was the moment that I changed my everyday practice. And you probably have had some moments like this in the last few years. I think many of us have chosen to, limit our diet of information, right? We choose where we receive our news or we take breaks from social media, all of those sort of examples. But about 13 years ago, when I went on my yoga teacher training retreat, it was a 72-hour retreat, and we went to this beautiful piece of property in the North Shore of the Lake Pontchartrain. If you're not familiar with New Orleans, it's about 45 minutes or an hour away from the city, and it has this sort of extraordinary natural quality to it. We were like right on this natural stream, and you feel like you're in the country, even though you're quite close to the city. The course of that retreat included obviously a lot of yoga asana and a lot of chanting and meditation. And, I think we watched some movies and had, lots of conversation. But one of the agreements that we had was that we would disconnect ourselves from our technology, right? We would tell the people that we cared about, sorry, I'm not available this weekend. I left my phone in the car the whole weekend, and I was pretty disconnected from the outside world. And I got back into my car on the Monday morning to go home from the retreat. And I had had this habit until then that had been unintentional. I mean, it was intentional at some point. I wanted to be a well-informed member of society. And so I listened to NPR like it was my job, right? I listened to NPR in the morning while I was getting ready, in the car on the way to and from work. It was just sort of like always on in the background. And so what that meant is that I was constantly getting information. I was constantly getting news. I was constantly getting analysis of the news, regardless of your feelings or thoughts or opinions about NPR. Obviously, it has a certain worldview that comes with it. And I think of myself as a pretty savvy person. I'm able to evaluate where I'm getting my sources of information and to make my own judgments. And, I wasn't just receiving everything that I heard as the patent truth, but simply having that much information directed at me all the time. I got in the car on my way home after teacher training retreat, and I made a decision to put kirtan on instead of the radio. And if you've never heard it, kirtan is a, call and response, singing, chanting practice. It comes from the Bhakti yoga tradition. And my dear brother said once about it, he's like, it's kind of repetitive, isn't it? And it is. It's by design repetitive. It is a style of meditation practice. And as one of my teachers in that world, Krishnadas, says, the music is the sweet syrup. So it's a little bit of medicine in the mantra and that meditation practice, and a whole lot of sweet syrupy music. It's great. And I listened to kirtan my whole way home from the teacher training retreat, and I started listening to kirtan on my way to and from work. And I found I was less anxious. I wasn't that much less informed. I might not have had every single detail in the moment that something was happening, but I had an extraordinary sense of connectedness to the people around me and to myself that I had in many ways been sacrificing by always, having my attention, my awareness, being infiltrated by that news source. Now, I want to pause just for a second because I already know what you might be thinking because I'm thinking it. Is she saying I shouldn't pay attention to the things that are going to be upsetting or cause me anxiety? Because the world is full of upsetting things that are anxiety provoking. And if, the whole goal of this is, to find some peace of mind, and that means I have to completely stop paying attention to anything that would, pull me away from that peace of mind, I'm not sure if I'm on board with that. That sounds to me like spiritual bypassing. That sounds like avoiding the reality of the world instead of meeting the world with a fuller heart, which is what I think that deep and rich spiritual practice allows us to do. So that is not what I am suggesting. I am not suggesting you entirely divest your attention from the news. I am not suggesting that you stop focusing on hard things. And in fact, these attention practices, which we'll get to in a minute, I promise, these intention practices build the muscles that you already have on directing your focus to something that you might not otherwise want to focus on, something that might be hard or challenging. That, if given your druthers, you would just turn on Netflix and watch a rerun. But instead, you have the stamina and the capacity to read more about something that's really important to you, or to direct your attention into work, whether that's paid or service work, that is directly beneficial to the people around you and to the general well-being of the world. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but I think that acknowledging that our diet of information affects what we think, how we think, what and how we feel is the selling point here. That is why learning to work with your attention matters. Because if you can control your attention, again, it's the part of your consciousness you can control. If you can control your attention, you can begin to impact what and how you're thinking and feeling on a day-to-day basis. And that will expand your capacity to deal with things that might otherwise be challenging. We're going to start with a really simple breath focus practice. And if you've done any meditation at all, you have probably had some kind of instruction that looks like bring your attention to your breath and just watch, inhale, exhale, right? We'll get there in a minute, but that's the general gist of this. And you might already be thinking, I've already done this, Vera. I know what I'm doing. And okay, you can turn the podcast off and go do your breath awareness practice. I'm creating these episodes because I want you to have a guide. I want you to have some encouragement to actually do the practice, not just know that we know how. I learned how to do these practices originally in a yoga context. And that feels important for me to share that yoga is becoming much more visible in the West as more than just an exercise practice. But there are very specific techniques and instructions that are taught, have been taught for thousands of years, are taught, from teachers to students. And the basics, the very, very basics of it are this. It takes up 3 of the 8 different limbs, is what are called, of yoga. And those 3 are dharana, which is your attention, your focus. So you bring your focus to a single point. That is a dharana practice. Then dhyana is the ability to hold that extended focus on something for a while. And sometimes that's translated as concentration. In the classical yoga teachings, learning to work with our attention and our awareness are central to the work. And whether you know it or not, if you've ever been into a yoga class, your yoga teacher has been training you to redirect your attention and to work skillfully with where you're focused and the quality of that focus and awareness. In the yoga tradition, there are considered classical yoga. They're considered to be 8 different limbs of yoga. And you might already know this, so I'm just going to speed through it. And 3 of them are actually directed at this sort of work. And they're often together described as meditation, and that's fine. But for our purposes, I want to just share with you a little bit about them and why I think it's so important to think about them in this broken down way. The 3 pieces of this practice. The first is dharana, which is usually translated as focus, or more specifically, a single-pointed focus. And you'll see this in a minute when we get into the practice. You bring your attention and awareness to one single point of attention, right? So instead of going all over the place, you go like, okay, we narrow the beam and focus on this one particular thing. Once we have mastered the ability to hold that one-pointed focus, because it's no joke, then we begin to hold our attention on that thing. And the ability to hold your attention on one thing, one idea, one breath, energy, is called, and the translation of dhyana is often concentration. And if that works for you, great. So we start with a single point, and then we can extend that single point so that instead of just like, okay, I hold the single point, and then I go somewhere else, and then I come back to the single point, and then back to the single point, which is where most of us get stuck in our meditation practice for the rest of our lives, just full disclosure. We begin to be able to hold our attention on something for some extended period of time. And then over time, with many, many, many reps and sets of that, we find our awareness to be sort of completely absorbed in whatever the thing is that we're focused on. So not only are we directing our intention and our awareness to the breath, there's like nothing other than the breath. The breath becomes like a whole world. And that quality of absorption, of just, being transfixed by something, is called samadhi. All 3 together, we call those the 3 steps sanyama. So you might practice sanyama on, right? That's your vocabulary lesson for today. So what we're talking about really is in many ways all 3 of those things, but you can see the distinction between them. And that helps us to understand that this is not a one and done kind of process. And in fact, it does require steady, committed, dedicated effort, just like building any other muscle or developing any other skill does. Because I know for sure that you have become completely absorbed in something by accident and lost 20 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, right? Suddenly Netflix is saying, are you sure you want to watch another episode? It's like the most shaming thing ever. So that's the ability to become absorbed in things can happen by default. And so what these practices do is they give us choice, right? And that choice is then what leads to control. It leads to our ability to have some agency in our lives. Okay, that's enough background. Find a way that you're comfortable. And if you're driving, now might not be the time to do this, but maybe it is. But otherwise, if you're in a space where you can just kind of settle in, I invite you to settle in. See if you can adjust your body and make some shifts so that you're a little more comfortable and that you won't be quite as distracted, because those distractions will become something you have to work against when you're developing this focus and awareness practice. So often we instruct to close the eyes, and that's just, again, to make it easier. We're lowering the barriers to make ourselves more likely to be successful. If closing your eyes isn't available to you for now, for whatever reason, it's not necessary. And once you've found yourself settled, begin to bring your attention to the very tip of your nose. Just maybe you move your nose around a little bit so that you can feel it, and then continue to witness the very tip of the nose and see if you can find the very front corner of your nostrils in your awareness. And notice the breath moving there at the very front corner of the nostril, the very tip of the nose. Noticing the inhaling breath, the receiving breath. The little pause at the top of the inhale, and then the exhale, the releasing breath. It can be helpful in the beginning to give ourselves words to repeat. So we just name inhale, pause, exhale, pause, inhale. And if that helps you keep your focus, feel free. Otherwise, we're just going to sit here for about a minute and notice the sensation of breath right at the tip of the nose. Notice the quality and the rate and the rhythm of the breaths. You may have awareness that there is more freedom of breath on one side of the nose than the other. Allow that to just be a part of your witnessing, part of your attention. Nothing needs to change. You do not need to take action on anything. You don't need to make anything happen. Just be in a full state of present awareness. Slowly beginning to blink your eyes open again. This is why the practice is so important. It's so important that we actually do it and not just talk about it. Because you probably learned more about your ability to focus, the nature of your attention in that minute than you have from anything I've said so far. Some of the things that you might have noticed, you realize at some point in that brief period of time, you're not paying attention anymore. Your brain has gone somewhere else entirely. And maybe, depending on how much practice you have, you're able to just bring yourself back. Or maybe then you spent the whole rest of the time beating yourself up about how bad you are at this. Maybe you've even told a story that you just can't focus, right? You have a lot of, distractibility, and it's just not possible. Maybe you became so enraptured, so attached to that breath focus that when I started to bring you back, you got mad, right? You were like a little resentful that you didn't get to do more of that. So that too is something that's really interesting to notice. You might even have felt a little bit of longing, like you'd like to go back there. And conversely, it might have been torture. It might have been so difficult to just sit there and stay focused. You might have had a running stream of thoughts in your head the whole time. And I think sometimes we have a running stream of thoughts in our head and we don't even realize that that's what's happening. So there's like a whole world of possibility that can happen in just that brief period of time focused on one particular thing. We use the breath as a point of focus because it's always available and it's free. There's probably a lot more to be said about the breath, but it's there and it's available. There are so many other points of focus, places we can direct our attention. And there are so many of them that there are entire schools of meditation that are dedicated to specific areas of focus. What matters is this. We learn the ways that we are distracted and distractible. We learn what it feels like to direct our attention and our awareness towards something when maybe we want to be doing something else, right? Or we were doing something else and beginning to extract ourselves from that other thing, from the attachment to whatever it was we were doing, and to come here and to do this. Creates in us this ability to redirect ourselves. It creates in us a fluidity and more capacity to detach ourselves from something that we're really hyper-focused on or obsessed about or anxious about or really like judgment, like hard judging ourselves or somebody else, or we've spun out in a rage, right? And all we can think about is this one person who's done this one fucked up thing. And having done this practice of noticing, my brain wandered away, I'm just going to bring it back. Okay, that's what it feels like for breath to be at the tip of my nose. Is not about the breath at the tip of the nose. It is our ability to detach from those very sticky thoughts and feelings and attention suckers and to choose where we are directing what we're focused on. This is a game-changing, life-changing skill. And so many people move around in the world without realizing that it is available to them. That is something that they can do. It's something they can get better at. Often we feel like we are just hijacked. Our attention is stolen by other people. that the algorithms and the apps and the everything is designed to be addictive and a focus hog. And it is. That's exactly how they're designed. They are brilliantly, elaborately built to hijack your dopamine seeking. And this is the antidote. This simple practice of sitting still and redirecting your attention to your breath is one of those things. You can redirect your attention to your body awareness. You can redirect your attention to a particular image if you like keeping your eyes open. There are so many different options. This is similar to the listening practice in that listening is a kind of attention. But I find the listening practice teaches us to be more receptive, whereas this practice of attention begins to teach us where our agency lies. And in a world where there is so much information, where we are bombarded by all sorts of, sales pitches and ads and news stories and trends and, new work stuff we have to keep up with and the lists that we have, everything that's happening in our life all the time. This ability to let that go and just come back to where we were, to redirect our attention, is absolutely essential. So I'll put it in a metaphorical sense before I talk about what I would give you as an assignment for your everyday practice moving forward. If your attention is a currency, you can think about it like money. We think about how we earn money, how, we each have our own very unique code, how we deal with our finances. So how much money you're making, how easily you save money, how easily you spend money. Are you a person who goes into debt? Does debt totally freak you out? Once you have a savings account, do you know when to use it? Are you a super wise investor of money? Like, do you know what kind of investments and what your portfolio needs to look like in order for you to be set 30 years from now? I'm a mix of all of those things. You probably are too. And if we think about attention like that, right? The choices that we make about our money on a day-to-day basis. If I buy this coffee instead of making coffee at home, if I go to the grocery store without a list versus going to the grocery store with a list, if I'm willing to look at my budget and plan where my expenses will be and when they'll be, all of that, right? Am I able to look at my portfolio or think about retirement, to plan in the future what I am doing with the next dollar in front of me is related to every single piece of that. So if I can learn to spend this $1 wisely, and maybe that means saving it, maybe that means investing it, maybe that means, using it to buy a fancy coffee, whatever we're splurging on these days, little boo-boo. If I can learn to use that dollar in front of me wisely, then it is far more likely that 30 or 40 years from now, I will be in a wise financial situation. The parallel is right there, that if I can learn to use my limited attention, because it is limited, unfortunately, if I can learn to use my attention to direct it in a wise way today, I will begin to experience what that wisdom does for me in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. I will see how that has impacted my relationships, how that's impacted my personal growth, what I've been able to learn, the kinds of achievements that I've made, right? I can't make a podcast. I can't have 100 podcasts episodes without one podcast episode. And I can't have one podcast episode without being able to sit and focus on what I'm going to talk about. And then to be able to be present here with you. Everything we want, everything that we are looking to achieve in our lives is available to us in this one simple practice. I know that sounds like a tall order, but I believe it. I think that it is true. If we can learn how to direct and redirect our attention as necessary, everything else is gravy. And it sounds really simple, and it is not. So here is your assignment in the same way. And I'm giving you this assignment that my first coach gave me, and that I sometimes offer to my coaching clients as well, because I find it to be incredibly powerful. Most of us as humans are really good at coming up with the worst case scenario, right? This is the way that our unconscious, right, subconscious, our consciousness is out of our control, right? All the ways that this could go wrong, how it could be rejected, why they won't like me, how I did it wrong, how it's going to fail. And that's useful, actually, because it means that we can plan, right? It means that we can build in some strategies so that we're more likely to be successful, right? If I can think about like, oh, here are all of the ways that this could go wrong, well, then I can build some contingency around all the ways that something can go wrong. And that habit of always looking for the worst case scenario, of seeing the way that everything could just go all the way down in flames, and before I know it, I'm living in a cardboard box on the corner, that in many ways is kind of hardwired. It's why the species still survives. I mean, full stop. Really helpful. And because of that, we have a tendency when we're trying to do something in our lives to repeat to ourselves all of the ways that this could go wrong, or to sort of beat ourselves up about how we're not doing something as well as we think we're going to do it. And it turns out that as a strategy, negative reinforcement, which is what that is about 5 or 6 times less effective than positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is like, what's going well? How that was successful. How could this be successful? What's the best case scenario here? I'll say that again. Positive reinforcement is 4 to 5 times as effective as negative reinforcement. With my coaching clients, this is a practice that we work on together all the time. And it's part of my job is to help people understand how much possibility is available to us in any moment, not just all of the nightmare scenarios that we have crafted in our head at 2 a.m. The practice, the everyday practice of redirecting our attention from what could go wrong towards what could go right is also a game changer. So here's just an example. I want you to think about what you did yesterday. What day of the week was yesterday? What did you do? Did you go somewhere? Were you working? Were you not working? Did you see people? Just think about what you did yesterday. And now think about one thing that went well yesterday. I'm waiting. If you're in a place where you could say it out loud, I dare you to say it out loud. So I taught a really sweet yoga class yesterday, and I know that it went well. And that actually holds in it 2 things that I think are important for us to do on a regular basis, which is not just what went well, but what did you do well? What did you do well yesterday? Not just like what happened to go okay. Where did your effort result in something positive? If this is an easy exercise for you, congratulations, and I applaud you, and I want to bless and release you on your way. If you're like the rest of us mere mortals, and this question is like the $64,000 one, welcome to the club. And I want to reassure you that it's just a skill that we can develop and we can learn. But maybe nobody taught you. And it's okay that they didn't, and you can always learn now. And just like any other skill, it's also something that we have to repeat on a regular basis or we get rusty. And I'm speaking there from experience. So it would be just as tempting for me, for example, to think about how nobody listens to the podcast. This whole thing is dumb. Nobody cares. I should give up. Just shouting into the void. That is my default setting. It requires effort and practice and lots of attention to think about all of the ways that this could go really well. The ways that this particular episode might reach somebody who needs to hear it at exactly this moment and who realizes how much agency and control they have over their life, and that this one particular idea of what they did well could permanently transform how they move in the world. And then I think about all of the people that they meet, all of the things that they accomplish, the way that they feel about themselves after that, forever. And just telling you about that right now, like I have goosebumps. And I'm sure as hell more likely to record an episode when I'm focused on that. It feels much more effortless. It feels interesting. It feels easy almost like I'm compelled, because that's what I want. So here is your assignment. Your assignment is to turn this practice into an everyday walking around practice. When you're in your car, or when you get on your bike, or when you go for your morning walk, instead of popping in this podcast or some other podcast or listening to music or, scrolling on social media or whatever else we spend our time doing, I want you to spend 1 minute thinking about what you did well yesterday. And if it's the end of the day, maybe you think about, like, you're on your commute home. What did I do well today? And then I want you to think, instead of how something could go wrong, or in addition to how something could go horribly wrong, what are all of the ways it could go extraordinarily right? What would knocking it out of the park look like? What would it feel like to have that kind of success under your belt? This is also an attention practice. Because just like we said at the beginning, like our environment absolutely influences where our attention goes. This is another example of that repeating these ideas about this could go well. Well, here's some ways that it could go really well. This, maybe my boss will really like this presentation. Maybe that client will say yes, and not just say yes, they'll want to do even more work with me. Maybe my kid will come home from school and tell me how great today was. And they'll say, thank you so much for helping me do this. If we can redirect our attention in that way, our lives change because we start to then see over and over and over again all of the things that are going well, in addition to all of the things that are challenging. Again, I am not suggesting that you look away from the painful things in your life or from the world that we're in that is on fire. And I think that so much that I put it in the subtitle of the podcast. I think we are moving in a time right now where it is so easy to find what's not going well. And that the effort required to find the good stuff and the helpers is essential for us to be bolstered and motivated to keep moving forward. To borrow a phrase, to build the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. Because that's why I'm doing this. And I hope it's why you're here. Because you know that it's not worth giving up on just yet. But in order to keep going, we have to find ways to sustain ourselves and to build our courage and to build our capacity to sometimes direct our attention to the things that are really painful and hard. And on behalf of everyone everywhere, I am so grateful to you for doing this work and for doing the work of building that world. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.